So we would pull up outside the train station in Lower Hutt, and I would get out and lift the front seat up so that my imaginary children could get out of the car.
Why do you parent like that?
Hello, welcome back. Manawatia a matariki to everyone. I hope you had a very restful and lovely holiday weekend for those in Aotearoa. This week on the podcast we have Hannah Porter, who is the founder and owner of Bear and Moo. Bear and Moo, who we love so much here because they got behind this podcast right from the beginning and were like, hey, yeah, little known podcast that hasn't even launched yet, we'll sponsor your first 5 episodes and help you get off the ground. And we love them so much. Hannah started Bear and Moo at her dining room table as a side hustle, and now it is the beautiful empire that you see before you today. Hannah and the Bear and Moo team are opening their very first brick and mortar store, and it's opening this week on Wednesday. So she says what the address is in the pod, and I'll put it into the show notes, but I will actually be at the launch, which as you're listening to this will be tomorrow. So if you want to come down to the launch and meet me and say hey, and me and baby Max will be there, I'd love to see you. I'd love to meet some listeners of the pod. If you're a kid-based listener, please come down and support Bear and Moo and say hey, it would be so great. In terms of this podcast, there is a content forecast for miscarriage and PFMR. I think those are the hard, sort of tricky conversations that we talk about, so please look after yourself if that applies to you. If that's something that feels tricky for you, please take care of yourself. I loved this conversation with Hannah. It was so awesome to get to talk to her and hear what makes her amazing brain tick, and as well as just get to know the person behind the name, because we see her so often on Bear and Moo social media, but to hear her parenting journey is really, really just such a privilege. Follow us on all the things. Follow me on social media at Why Do You Parent Like That podcast. Substack, follow my Substack where you will get the secret 6th question that I ask everyone. I'm getting some really lovely feedback from that at the moment, so definitely head over there and you don't want to miss out. And I think that's everything from me. Hope you enjoy this episode, and I'll chat to you next week. Love you. Say it back.
Why do you parent like that?
Today's guest is the kind of parent entrepreneur that you imagine in a moment of chaos and think, how does she do it? But the answer, as it often is in parenting, is a mix of love, necessity, and figuring it out on the fly. Hannah Porter is the founder of Bear and Moo, the beloved New Zealand brand that's helped thousands of families embrace reusable cloth nappies without losing their minds or their sense of style. What started as a mum of three's search for affordable, eco-conscious nappies quickly grew into a booming online business with a cult following and a thriving community of parents trying to do things a little more gently. She's a mum, a business owner, and though she might not say it herself, a real champion of other mums just giving it a go. In fact, Bear and Moo was the very first sponsor of this podcast. Before I'd even released an episode, Hannah said yes. She backed this project, not because it was polished or proven, but because she believed in supporting a fellow NZ mum putting something new into the world. That kind of support speaks volumes, not just about Hannah's generosity, but about the kind of values that built Bear and Moo in the first place. So Hannah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's so nice to have you after everyone has heard about Bear and Moo so much on this podcast. It is lovely to have the face, the voice, the creator of Bear and Moo.
It's very, very cool to be here, and getting to support something like this is pretty awesome.
Yeah. So if no one has met you on the internet before, would you like to give us a quick introduction to who you are?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm the founder of Bear and Moo. We launched 7 years ago in Hamilton, and in very, very short amount of time we are opening our very first bricks and mortar retail store, which is, equally exciting and terrifying because I've got no idea what I'm doing, but we just make it up as we go along. I've got 3
actually, the day that this comes out, it will be your store opening day.
Yeah,
so
okay, well, we're
happy store opening day.
Thanks. Still terrified. It's going to be great. So I've got 3 kids, they're 10, 8 and 4, and my husband works with me in the business, which is really cool. And yeah, I feel like most parents, the life revolves around work and kids most of the time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's probably me in a nutshell.
Nice. All right, let's crack into it then.
Sounds
Our
good.
first question of the pod is, tell me about your journey to becoming a parent.
Well, I was the weird child that always knew that I was going to have kids. Mm-hmm. Right from when I was really, really little. I didn't have imaginary friends, I had imaginary children, and my real life friends think that this is hilarious. But I had like 7 imaginary kids when I was like I don't know,
Oh my gosh,
6, 7 years old.
stressful.
I know, and they all had names and they all had jobs or went to school or whatever. And my mum, the absolute angel that she is, we had a two-door car. So we would pull up outside the train station in Lower Hutt and I would get out and lift the front seat up so that my imaginary children could get out of the car. So I could then put the seat down and get back in and we would drive to my grandparents. So I always, I was like, I am going to be a mum. It's something I reflect on often because parenting is so hard and so much harder than I ever thought it was going to be. And so nowadays when I have people say to me, you know, I'm not sure if I want kids, and I'm like, well, don't do it then, because I was adamant I wanted kids. I always knew I wanted kids and I've got them, and it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And so I'm like, if you're not 100% on board, then it's a no, is kind of
I
my
agree.
now.
Even on the days where you are like so beside yourself, you need to know that you chose it and 100% wanted it. And if you don't have that, don't do it.
Don't do it. No. So we were incredibly lucky with our first. We got pregnant very, very quickly. Once we kind of made that decision, I think it took 2 months. And so we were very, very lucky to get pregnant. I suffered really badly with hyperemesis with all 3 of the kids. Vomited till 23 weeks with my first. The last time was in the car park of the scan place. It was really classy. Yep. And then went into spontaneous preterm labour at 31 weeks while we were on our baby moon in Auckland. So my waters broke at the Stanford Plaza Hotel and I had to ring my midwife at 11:30 at night on Easter Sunday and be like, hey, I think my waters just broke. She's like, you're 31 weeks, get to a hospital now. So I've had a huge journey when it comes to that stuff. I've been pregnant 5 times. We lost 2, one through medical complications and one through a missed miscarriage. I've had 1 child with footling breech. I've had 2 C-sections, an emergency and a planned. I've had a natural delivery. I've had NICU time. Like, I'm kind of like...
You've done it all.
Yeah, like if you've got a checkbox for all the shit you don't want to happen, I'm kind of it. I've been hospitalised. I've had IV fluids. I've had all the... To the point that after, when I was pregnant with our youngest, Maddie, and we knew she was breech, so I was told she had to be a C-section because of the complications I have as well, because I've got a bicornuate uterus, so baby only grows in 1/2. Like, I've got all the things. And I said, hey, if we're doing a Caesar anyway, could we tie my tubes? And they were like, yes, please, we don't want to see you again. And I was like, great, I don't want to come back. So that's ace, thanks. So yeah, I'm kind of like, I've had the checkbox of all the things.
Yeah, you know when medical professionals are saying, hey, this is your last baby, eh? Because that happened to me with my second. All the medical professionals in the room were like, maybe no more, guys. Maybe this is it. And we were like, yeah, we're done too. Don't worry about it.
I had the same midwife for all 5 pregnancies who was incredible. And I remember when we got pregnant with Maddie and I said, like, I feel like if this baby doesn't stick, we're done. And she said, yeah, 3 D&Cs is normally like people's limit. Like that's normally the point where people are like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I really came to terms with the fact that like we might be done at 2 and I might just be destined to be a boy mum. And that was cool. Like I was never trying for a girl. We always thought we'd have lots of kids. But with my history and my, you know, everything that goes wrong, I was like, you know what, three's good. And now I've got 3 and I'm like, sometimes I'm like, 3's too many. Two was a good number.
3's a lot of kids.
But they're here now and we love them all. And so we're keeping them all.
But you are outnumbered.
We are outnumbered. Yeah. So it's, there was very much that discussion of okay, what happens if this doesn't work? And I'm like, I'm done. This is it. This is our last chance to get 3. And if it doesn't work, I'm cool with that. So a bit of a journey.
Yeah. And then was it all quite varied in terms of like postpartum experiences for you, or what was that like for the 3?
I think with Regan, my first was like very much thrown in the deep end because we were due to start antenatal classes the next day. So I remember being in labour and I'm like screaming at the midwives being like, I don't know what I'm doing. Start antenatal classes tomorrow. And they're like, we'll help. It's fine.
We'll teach you as you go.
We'll get through this. And he was, to be fair, a really easy birth. He was 3 pound 3. You know, I actively pushed for 20 minutes. I was in labour for like 4 hours. It was such an easy birth to the point that I was lying. We were waiting for my placenta to come out. He'd been whipped off to NICU and I said, that wasn't like terrible. Like I could do that again. And they looked at me and they're like, do we need to talk about contraception? I was like, not today. Like I'm not going to do it now. But like,
can you guys... Your husband needs to stand on the other side of the room, like, separate.
I don't want to do it immediately, but, like, it was shit, but it wasn't, like, as shit as I was expecting it to be. But that's partly because he was so little. It was a bit like a Chinese burn because he had no weight behind him. So every time he started to go out, if the pushing stopped, he kind of slid back up again. I was like, well, that's shit. Yeah. So in the end, I was just like, right, well, we're doing this. And he just
Well, I guess we'll just push forever then.
We'll just keep pushing. But my placenta was retained, so I ended up having to have an epidural afterwards in order to get my placenta out. out, and then we did 6 weeks in NICU. So we were in Auckland for 9 days, and then we transferred to Waikato by helicopter. And that was a really weird feeling because once we got settled at Waikato, we went home. And there was this feeling of like walking into our house and being like, well, I'm not pregnant anymore, but I also don't have a baby. We've got no food because we've been in Auckland for 2 weeks. It's dinner time. Let's go out. So like we went to Lone Star because I was like, where can I comfortably go in track pants and a hoodie and not have to dress up because I'm going straight back up to the hospital. And we went out for dinner and I'm like, this is the most bizarre experience because like 2 weeks ago I was pregnant and now I'm not pregnant, but I also don't have my baby with me.
And I also wasn't planning on not being pregnant, right? Like,
No,
you know,
like, I
in
thought
your head you had 9 more weeks.
he
to
was
go.
coming in June, and then no, he was coming in April apparently, actually. So that was and I mean, we're terrible at naming children anyway. It takes us forever, but we hadn't talked names. I made sure we named him before he got on the helicopter to Waikato. That was like my deadline. I was like, this kid's not traveling without a name, thanks. But it was like I found the transition like not bad. I was bored a little bit because I was sitting in NICU and my baby was fine and we were one of the lucky ones. Like there was nothing wrong with him except he was little and needed time to grow and develop and able to be able to feed. So I was like, I was still working casually for the company that I'd previously been working for because I was like, I'm bored. Like, can I take the finances to NICU and sit in the parent room and like reconcile some bank statements, please? I've got, I need to keep my brain going. So the first, like I found it reasonably easy because he came home from hospital on a 3-hourly routine. He was like this dream baby. By 9 months old, he slept 14 hours at night. Like he would go to sleep at 7 and he woke at 9 o'clock in the morning. And I would go to bed at midnight and still get 9 hours sleep. Like he was such a dream. So we decided to have a second one. And that's where everybody
Everyone gets quickly humbled. It's okay. Yeah. You have to have a dream first, have a humbling second.
Yeah, and so then we had the second, and that was when I got postpartum anxiety. I don't know, I wouldn't say it was postpartum depression, but it was definitely anxiety. I really struggled to leave the house. I didn't know how to do two. Like Regan was 17 months at this point. So he started walking while I was on bed rest because I had to go on bed rest then because of so like I'm on bed rest with a 15-month-old who can't walk yet, and then he started to walk just as Hadley was born, and all of a sudden I'm like, I don't know if I trust myself to leave the house with two because what if Regan runs off and I can't chase him, and what if, and so I just didn't go anywhere without my mum or Richard or somebody with me. And I think my anxiety just got worse and worse. So I really struggled with that 1 to 2. And especially as well because I expected him to be really early and he wasn't. He came pretty much bang on 38 weeks. So we went from the hospital to the birth centre and then brought him home. And I'm like, what the hell do I do with a brand new baby? Like
he's not on a 3-hourly routine.
Yeah, I assumed we were going back into NICU again. And all of a sudden I've got like a baby that cluster feeds and doing all the totally normal baby things that I just wasn't expecting. And then we had the couple of losses and then had Maddie. And Maddie was just a totally different experience because by that point I had the business and I don't do downtime. So she was a week old the first time she came to HQ. What was our HQ? And one of the staff brought in a lazy boy that she had in her garage, and I would just sit in the warehouse and feed Maddie and like just be there because I felt like it was my business and I needed to be there. And I was like sharing the journey with customers even from the hospital, but I also had a totally different level of support because the boys were both older and one was at school, one was about to start school. Richard was working for the business, so he was around and he was very active in looking after Maddie so that I could work as well. My mum lives across the road, so we've got this whole village. And so it was just a totally different experience because it wasn't me at home with the kids. I wasn't home. And yeah, it was just a very, very different experience. So now I think I'm just anxious because, I'm 40 and have 3 children and a business. But I didn't get that same level of like postpartum anxiety that I did the second time. So very much 3 very different experiences.
Yeah, it's amazing that you kind of had like the whole spectrum.
Yeah.
But cool in terms of like what you do because you now have all this insight to like what's going to help people in NICU, what's going to help people in that transition from 1 to 2, what's going to help. You've got all of that insight, which is very cool.
Yeah.
And what's it like working with Richard?
It's fantastic and really hard. It's amazing in the sense of we're working towards a goal together. So when we're working late nights and weekends and things, we know that it's because we're working on something for us.
Yeah.
His brain works very differently to mine, and that's a really awesome thing because we come at things from a very different perspective a lot of the time. And he's a civil engineer by trade, so he's incredibly creative and very logical as well. Whereas I'm like, well, we'll just figure it out. Like, we'll just do the thing and make it happen. And I've said to him a lot over the last few weeks when we've been moving into our new warehouse, because he's just drowning at the moment. And I'm like, yeah, you're doing amazing. I just need like 3 of you. Like, you're not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
I just need more of you. Like, he is that
Clone
person
you.
who he's so smart and just gets it, and we're just on the same page. The flip side is we don't know how to talk about anything that's not the business or children now, because that's become our life. And so we go out for a date night and it's all we talk about, and we don't have a lot of other hobbies, and we don't know how to switch off. And so we do a lot of evening and weekend business stuff. And so I think that's kind of the downside, is there isn't that separation between home and work, or, you know, being us versus being colleagues. It's just all linked in together. I think it's definitely a bonus, because it does mean that while I'm running a business and working too hard, we get so much time together, where if we weren't working in it together, I don't think a partner would necessarily understand what I was up to and how much I was working, and therefore get why I don't switch off. I'm just going to check that. So yeah, I kind of feel like if he didn't work in the business, it could be kind of problematic. But because he does, he gets that, like, we're on the same page. He gets the level of stress and the extra hours and things like that.
And the common goal of, like, the more we're putting in here, the more we're going to get out of it, and, like, both being equally as invested in the input and the output. That's pretty amazing. Yeah. But it is, my husband and I always joke that, like, as soon as we had our older son, Freddie, we just didn't have anything to talk about anymore. And I can't imagine that on a business level as well. Like, yeah,
it is really interesting. Like, I often joke that, like, I don't know what people who don't run their own business do with their time, because, like, when the kids go to bed, I generally pull out my laptop, and I try really hard not to, but I would say more often than not at the moment, just because we've got lots going on with the new shop. But, like, we just, we probably need to get better at separating that and finding other things to talk about.
You know, there's stages and stages though, right?
Yeah.
Like, maybe once you've, like, got the shop opened and you're all moved in, everything's looking good, then maybe we can revisit the laptop hours. But right now, I feel like
moment, this is just the stage of life that we're in. And
yes, absolutely.
We'll come out of it eventually.
Yeah, totally. We'll move on to the next question, which is, what does successful parenting mean or look like to you?
To me, the most important thing is that my kids know that they're loved. And that's it. I don't really care about the detail and the little bits and pieces. You know, obviously I like it when they're being incredibly kind people, and when we're not having screaming matches in the morning to get out the door for school, and when you know, they eat a vegetable or a piece of fruit every now and then, or, you know, they're doing okay in school and they don't feel like they're falling behind, and, you know, things like that. Like, all of that is really, really cool stuff. But at the end of the day, I just want my kids to know that they are loved and supported, and that if they want to talk to me about anything, they can, and that I'm kind of a safe space for them. And to me, if that's happening, then that's success. Because I just, you know, one of the things I try really hard to do now, while they're still young, is stop and listen when they want to talk to me about something that's important to them. Because if I don't listen to the little things now, then they're not going to want to come to me with the bigger things when they're older. And I always had a really close relationship with my mum growing up. It was just the two of us. I had a lot of freedom and a lot of there was a lot of mutual respect, and there was a lot of, you know, me being able, I could talk to her about anything. So I've always really wanted to instill that in my kids, that I am a safe space they can come to, and no matter what they tell me, they will always be loved. And yeah, they might get in trouble sometimes because they've done something wrong, but that doesn't mean I love them any less. So I feel like if you're doing that and you're raising, you know, kind children who give a shit about other people, then to me that's the priority. I don't care what they do for a job. I don't care, you know, how much money they make or any of that kind of stuff. It's are they loved, and do they care about others?
And how do you think your mum created that relationship with you? Like, what do you think she did to kind of foster that openness? And
I've thought about this a lot, and I don't know. Like, there is definitely some key moments that I remember growing up. Like, she was a stay-at-home mum until I was 5 or 6, I would say. So we got a lot of time together when I was really little. She was always there helping me with homework and things like that. But then as I got older, I mean, we did everything together, obviously, because it was just the two of us. But as I got older, she didn't say no a lot. Like when I had my first boyfriend and wanted to go into town on a Friday night and catch a 2 a.m. train home, she picked us up from the train station, you know, every Friday or Saturday night at God knows what time. And I look at it now and I think, Jesus. And like she'd let me go to parties, but with a boundary, and you know, like when I was younger, and she's like, yeah, you can absolutely go because it's at somebody's house that I know. Like she was sensible about it, but she's like, but you're not drinking. She's like, I will buy you whatever non-alcoholic drink you want, but you're not drinking. And that was fine because I wasn't a drinker anyway. But she, you know, and she said, and I will pick you up at this time. And she turned up and she picked me up, and I knew the rules. And so I respected them because I got the freedom and flexibility
You
in
got
return.
lots of yeses as well.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, I was an only child, I was the only grandchild, I was the only niece, so, you know, typical only child syndrome.
Favourite.
Very spoiled. I was the favourite. I was a bit of a control freak. If you said we were going to the movies on the weekend and then it was a beautiful sunny day and Mum said, should we go to the beach instead? Absolutely not. You said we were going to the movies, so we
Don't change the rule. Don't change the plan on me now.
Don't change it. Yeah, Mum was just always really good at that stuff, and I mean, she's an amazing grandmother now to my kids, but she loves kids. She was a primary teacher. She probably should have trained in ECE. She's really good at that stuff in a way that I'm not sometimes. But yeah, she just always fostered communication and we just always talked about stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. And then is that something that you're like, obviously you say you're deliberately trying to do it now.
Yeah.
What are some of the like practical ways that you're doing it for people who are listening and are like, I'd love to do that?
Yeah, I think I have to kind of stop myself and remember to do it. Like the other night, I lay down with both the boys because they share a bedroom. And so I lay down with both of them individually before bed and just kind of was like, hey, how was your day? Like, let's just talk through. It was Saturday and they'd had a busy day with playing football in the morning, and then it was Maddie's birthday party, and that was quite an overwhelming experience because there were a lot of children and there was a bouncy castle and it was loud and there was a lot. So I just kind of sat with them afterwards and kind of checked in and how they were doing, and they're big into like computer games and stuff at the moment, and so sometimes they do want to tell me all about the character or the game, or that I'm like, and I don't understand, nor do I particularly care. But I will listen so that they feel like they can share that stuff with me. And I try to involve them in, you know, what do you want in your lunchbox this week? And can you give me a dinner suggestion so that there's one thing that I know that you're going to eat this week? And, you know,
You
those
chose
kind
it.
of like, yeah, you chose it. You ate it last week, but you chose it. So just trying to, I think, involve them in those conversations and trying to check in with them. And I guess also when I find like if they're struggling with anything or struggling at school, or having those conversations with them, and also not being afraid to say reach out to their teacher on their behalf if they don't want to know that I've got their back and I'm going to be that buffer for them. Yeah, it's definitely a juggle though, because I think typical parent guilt, we never have enough time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Is Regan at intermediate yet or still primary
No,
school?
primary, but his primary goes through to intermediate, so he'll be there for another few years.
How's that like? Because I know, speaking with other boy parents, that's quite an interesting time to be raising boys.
Yep.
How have you sort of found that like age of like 9, 10, 11?
Yeah, so I've got one that's 8 and one that's 10, and we're getting it. There's all the emotions at the moment, all the emotions, all the feelings. Everything is a big deal. Everything's a huge deal. Everything is the world is ending. And I think as well, I'm noticing a bigger awareness about things people at school are saying, or things that are going on online because they play internet games and stuff like that. He's also at the point, I think, where other people saying things that might be, I don't know, like the kind of stuff you do at 10 and 11. You're being cheeky about private parts, or, you know, things like that. He actually tends to get quite embarrassed about it. Or if he reads something in a book, he'll be like, oh, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. And he'll want to, like, he'll get me to read the page and be like, they said something that I didn't like. And I'm like, oh, what was it? So we'll sit down and he'll be like, oh, it's this part here, and I'll read it. And I'll be like, okay, like I get why you're uncomfortable. It's totally normal and it's fine, but maybe do you not want to read that book anymore? And he's like, maybe not. I'm like, don't read it then. We'll move on to something else. So yeah, there's definitely a lot more awareness, I think, at this age, but there's a lot of emotions. And I think I struggle because I feel like at 10, he could have more responsibility than he does, but the forgetfulness and the not wanting to do things and the, you know, wanting to rule his own world means it's a battle of wills sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, it's an interesting time, that's for sure.
And I guess that's that thing of like, you know, all the parenting experts or whatever tend to do things in ages of like, by this age they should be, and this age they should be. And I guess that's like a very good reminder of like, your kid can be any age, but depending on what kind of kid they are, like that's how you're making the decision for them. And so coming back to that really like, your child is unique.
And it was
Respond to
hilarious.
them uniquely.
We had a conversation the other night, and I said, because it was talking about something, one of the boys at school, I think, has got a girlfriend or something, although it sounds like the girl doesn't know that she's got a boyfriend. I was like, that's a problem. But anyway.
That seems problematic, but we'll engage in that in a different time.
And then Hadley, he's like, well, Regan's had 3 girlfriends. I was like, oh, has he? And Regan's like, what? Who? And Hadley rattled them off. He's like, oh, no, they're just crushes. And I'm like, okay, cool. And so I told him the story about how I had my first boyfriend when I was like 11. And we held hands for 3 months, and he used to walk me home from school. And that was it. We didn't kiss, we didn't do anything. We were 11. He just walked me home from school and held my hand. And I was like, and then after 3 months, he broke up with me at school because he wanted to go out with my friend. And Regan was like, are you okay? Like, he put his hand on my shoulder. He's like, are you okay, Mum? And I'm like, baby, it was 30 years ago. Like, I'm totally fine. But thank
You're like,
you.
I fell on my feet. Thanks, babe.
I'm all right, mate. Been with you
Things
guys
have turned
20
out
years,
okay
it's
for me.
But he was just so like, oh my God, that must have been so hard and so embarrassing. And I'm like, I mean, at the time I was probably fuming, but also like I was 11, it's okay. But I think trying to remember what I was doing at that age and how I felt, although that's also mildly terrifying because I think that's some of the things I got up to, and I'm like, please don't.
I know. This is the thing, eh? I like, when I think about my teenage years, I'm like, I absolutely, if I have a teen like me, I'm going to be absolutely terrified. It's going to be no good.
Please don't do any of the things that I did. That would be great. Thanks. Just
absolutely.
Which is partly why I'm like, can we just encourage like the computer gaming and the football obsession? Because if you're into those things, you probably don't have the time or energy for girls or boys.
Actually, that is, my parents were very smart in that way, that they, like, any activity I wanted to do, they were like, yes, we will sacrifice all of our time transporting you to every single activity because then you've got no time to do anything else. And it totally worked for ages. All right, we'll move on to the third question, which is, what is something about your parenting style that feels relatively unique to you?
I wouldn't say unique, but I think one area where I'm probably incredibly lucky, based on some of what I see on the internet, is how much Richard and I share the load. So I think, like, yes, in some capacities, I would be the primary parent in the fact of, like, I think there's probably more mental load going on in my head, but I think that's just a female thing in general, is that we carry that mental load. But when it comes to the practical, I'm not the primary. I would say we're fairly even, like I think we split a lot of the drop-offs and pickups. Richard does a lot of bike riding, so a few days a week he'll bike the kids to school in kindy, and then the other days I'll drive and drop them off and pick them up. He is coaching one of the football teams this year, and so he'll do all the football training, and he was doing some of the after-school activities. We'll take turns or both go to swimming lessons on a Sunday. So it's definitely not all on me. He's way more actively involved in like Cubs and Scouts and things like that than I am, and I think that's probably, from what I gather, quite different to how some families do it, where, and I mean, I guess part of it is because we're both in the business together, but Richard does far more cooking than I do. He does far more cleaning than I do. He does, like, I pay all the bills, I do all the groceries, I do the meal planning. Like, there's definitely a shared load there, but I think when it comes to parenting, like, I wouldn't say that one of us is the primary parent, and so I definitely think that's a little bit different. He comes to every parent-teacher interview as well. We both go to, he's more likely than I am, but we try to both go to all the athletics and the school sports and the, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's unique, but I think because of the environment, the fact that we work together, the fact that it's our business, so we've got a bit of flexibility, it gives us the ability to show up for stuff like that a little bit more than it would if one of us was at a traditional 9 to 5. Does anybody work 9 to 5? 8 to 5? Job.
I know, 9 to 5, I'm like, where, can I have that, please?
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably a little bit different. And yeah, I think just like you were saying about your parents, like trying to encourage them to get into whatever sports and activities and things like that. We didn't have a TV for like 7 years, which actually started because I realised how lazy I was being. Used to be able to, like, I could turn the TV on through the app on my phone because it was a smart TV, and so on like some mornings Richard would go to work and then I didn't want to deal with the kids, so I would Chromecast and turn the TV on and just leave them there watching TV. And then it got to the point where they were like arguing at like 3 and 2, they were arguing about what they were going to watch, and I just had this moment where I'm like, what the hell are we doing? Like, I'm letting these kids control what they watch. So I ended up having like the computer open for one and the TV for the other, and I'm like, this is dumb. So we unplugged it from the wall and told them it was broken and then put it in the cupboard and just didn't have a TV for years. We recently got one. That's not to say that they were screen-free by any stretch. They have iPads, and so there was definitely YouTube and gaming and stuff like that. But it was just a different kind of vibe for a long time, whereas now Bluey is on repeat in our house because it's easy and everybody likes it and it's reasonably wholesome. So I'm totally okay with Bluey.
Yeah.
And so now we try and do like Friday night movie nights while we're eating takeaways on the lounge floor and stuff like that because, again, it's just that spending time together because I don't feel like we spend a lot of time together sometimes with how much I work.
Yeah, I guess that was something I sort of, from an outsider's perspective, of something that's quite unique to your parenting style is that obviously you and Richard both work in the business. And so I just wanted to, I guess, ask a few questions around like how you think that impacts your parenting style and like...
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, I don't think that mum guilt or parent guilt is unique to business owners. I think everybody has it. But I definitely feel like I don't remember off the top of my head the last weekend where we didn't come to work for one of the 2 days for, even if it was just for an hour or just to drop something off. Like, we are here a lot. And it definitely does make, like, I would say, like, Mondays, Richard picks the kids up and takes them home. Tuesday, Maddie finishes at lunchtime. So she comes to HQ for the afternoon, and then we pick up the boys and they come to HQ while I take Maddie to dance class. Wednesday, they usually go home, but sometimes my mum has them for the afternoon. Thursday, they have football training, so they go home. And then Friday, everybody's here until whatever time we leave. Last Friday, we ate dinner here because we were just trying to get stuff done. So we ordered pizza to HQ. So they spend a lot of time here, which is, they love it because it means they get their iPads and they can just zone out for a while. They've got bean bags here and a stash of food, and so they're totally happy. But I feel guilty that I'm like, we're not out doing something, we're not doing an activity. But it means that, like, when school holidays hit, or like, we do try and take time to block out to go and do stuff with the kids. And I guess, like I say, that flip side is that then when they've got an activity at school or a special assembly or cross country or whatever, we can show up to that because we've got that flexibility.
That is so cool.
And yeah, so I think it's hard because I think there's a lot of guilt that we're maybe not as invested in them as we should be, but I don't think they're missing out on anything. I think, like, they're well fed and they're well loved and they get to do all the activities that they're wanting to do and do stuff with them. And yeah, it's definitely interesting. Sometimes I stop and I'm like, shit. Like, have I spent enough time with my kids lately? Are we rushing around from place to place too much?
I have noticed even like just in starting the podcast, or I also did some study as well when I had my son when he was 1. And I feel like things that you're doing for yourself or like ventures that you've started for yourself, it almost like, I feel like there's more guilt in that than just like when I went back to normal work in between having my son and like,
and I think as well,
daughter.
Part of it is because we're so busy, but I think we're busy, not busy for the sake of busy, but I feel like you wear busy as a badge, as if to be like it's a good thing, and it's really not. I hate how busy we are all the time. But I watch other people's stories and things, and I'm like, how do people go places on the weekend? Because I'm buggered. Like, by the time we get to the weekend, I am exhausted. And, we're in and out of work all the time and we're working late and we're doing all of this. And I'm like, how do you then think, okay, on the weekend, like they're going to go do football in the morning and in the afternoon, we're going to go and do this activity. I'm like, by the afternoon, I just want to lie down and read a book for a couple of hours. Like, I am buggered. And I know that it's the stage that we are in and I know that we'll come out of it at some point, but there's definitely a bit of guilt there when I'm like, God, we don't go for bushwalks and we don't, take day trips places and we don't take them to Ninja Valley and Time Zone and do this fun stuff that I feel like we should. But I don't know how people have capacity to do that.
Yeah.
But then,
and it's like you can only do what is is sustainable.
Yeah. But they also, that winter they have sports Saturday and Sunday, and so that also takes up time. So that's why we booked a couple of days in the school holidays to go somewhere this time, because I'm like, I just feel like we need that connection time.
Nice.
Yeah, but no, there's definitely a lot of guilt.
Do you have you might not and that's fine, but do you have any ways that you've learnt to deal with the mum guilt or because I know that that's just something that so many mums deal with?
I think I read something somewhere once that was like, if you feel guilty, it means that you're a good parent, because if you weren't a good parent, you wouldn't care that you and so I think it's recognising that, I'm not a bad parent. It's just that we're busy. And that, you know, I think as well, having the self-awareness to recognise when sometimes it is too much, you know, when I can kind of stop and be like, God, they're being incredibly clingy. And then it's like, probably haven't seen enough of me lately. So, okay, maybe I just need to make sure that my phone is put away, make sure that I'm asking lots of questions at dinner, make sure that when somebody's getting overly emotional, I'm pulling them in for cuddles and reconnecting with them, you know, trying to just spend that extra time. So stopping and recognising when maybe it's justifiable guilt, you know, like that there
That it's
actually
not just
is an
like mum
issue.
guilt, it's like actual guilt.
Yeah. Whereas I think a lot of the time that mum guilt, I don't think it goes away. I think it just, it says, you know, we're brought up to expect that when you're parenting, you're putting your everything into the kids, but that's not the reality of today's society because we are often working or, you know, doing other things as well, or have multiple children. So, you know, if you're not working, chances are you're feeling the guilt because you've got multiple kids and you're trying to spread your time between them. You know, I think it's something every mother feels. I think we need to learn almost not to, because I don't think, I mean, it doesn't help anything. Feeling guilty doesn't help anything. We've just got to do the right thing that we can by our kids and by ourselves.
And I also, like, from talking to my husband, I don't think he gets dad guilt because he grew up knowing that he would go off to work and that would be fine and that's the expectation.
Yeah.
So it's like,
I think Richard does feel it, but I think that's again comes down to how many hours. Like that poor man only gets paid part-time, so he's meant to be doing, it's either 25 or 30 hours a week, but he a lot of mornings will get up and come down here at 6 o'clock in the morning and then come home just after 7 to get everybody up and ready for the day, and then come to work for 8:30 and stay till 3 and then go pick up the kids, and then maybe after dinner he might come back down and do more, and like he's only meant to be part-time. So I think he feels that guilt because he's like, there's just not enough time to do everything he wants to around the house and everything at work, and I know it's the stage we're in, and so, you know, it's constantly trying to find ways to ease some of that strain.
yeah, and I think that's like quite an important thing to highlight as well, is that I think we're like bombarded with the idea that we're meant to be trying to find balance and that, like, you know, we need to reevaluate our lives and find these shifts, but actually realistically sometimes you are just in a stage where it is just like busy and everyone's busy and there have to be sacrifices and your capacity is small and there's not going to be a way to find the balance, like that's, and you just have to sit in that discomfort, and that's okay too. What has your biggest what the was that moment been since becoming a parent? And I know there'll be a few.
I don't know, I feel like almost every birth and every loss that we've had have been a bit like that. And sometimes it's also, I think, that self-reflection when you look back on things. Like, as women, I do think that we just get shit done. Like, we just keep going. And so I remember when we had our first loss, which was, technically it was a termination, because we went to a scan and all of Babe's internal organs were on the outside of its body and its skull hadn't formed properly, and it wasn't compatible with life. So we made the decision to terminate because I had 2 other kids at home, and I was like, I'm not carrying a baby to full term to then explain to the kids why there's no baby.
Yeah.
But I didn't stop and grieve, because we don't. We just go.
2 other kids.
We've got 2 other kids, and I've got a business to run. And so, you know, I had a D&C on Wednesday, and by Friday I was at a book launch, and on Saturday we ran a sale, and we just kept going. And then we had a miscarriage the second time, at the same 10-week scan. And it wasn't until after that one that I kind of had this moment of like, shit, what if we can't get pregnant again? What if that's it? And you kind of, but I just feel like every time we went through a pregnancy, there was a, what the fuck was that moment? Like, there was, you know, going into labour at 31.4, I think I was. And I remember like sitting on the toilet because I thought I'd wet myself. I didn't know that it was, I was like, it kind of feels like I assume breaking waters would feel like, except it's too early. Spoiler alert, it was my waters breaking.
It was.
But I'm like sitting on the toilet on my phone in my Facebook Jew group being like, yo, this has happened. And everybody's like, I feel like you should call your midwife. And I was like, oh.
Go to the hospital.
I don't want to bug her. Like, because that's what we do.
For anyone listening, call your midwife in that
Call
scenario.
your midwife. Yeah, she was totally fine with it. And I remember, this is the most bizarre thing, but I used to get the Huggies emails every week, and the 30-week one said something about, like, if a baby's born after this point, then it's likely to be totally fine, viable and totally fine. So I just remember being in labour and being like, well, the baby will be fine, but, like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Because Huggies said so.
Huggies said so. That weekly EDM that gets sent out that's automated said that my baby will be fine, so we're okay.
So it'll be fine.
It'll be fine. And like, I had to call my mum and be like, hey, you know how we packed all the, like, because I already had a bag packed. I had the baby clothes. I had everything sorted because I was a bit of a control freak. And so I remember calling mum and being like, so I'm in labour. Can you go to our house and get all my stuff and drive it to Auckland for me, please? And then I think, like, with Hadley, like...
Thank God you were on a baby moon in Auckland and not in, like, the Cook Islands or, like, just somewhere, like, completely random.
Yeah. And we had no idea. Oh, and so then after that, when I got pregnant with Hadley, we went to our first scan and the sonographer was like, did you know you've got 2 uteruses? And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? She's like, see, you've got one over here with the baby in it and another one over here that's empty. And I'm like, so that would explain why my first came early. Same sonographer as we had the first time. So I'm like, why the fuck didn't you notice this?
How did you miss that?
But Cole. And then he was footling breech. So his foot was in my cervix, which essentially means that if my waters break, they run the risk of cord prolapse because as your cervix starts to dilate, his foot could come through with the cord and he could die. Yeah. And so from like 30 weeks, the hospital wanted to admit me. And I'm like, absolutely not. I've got a toddler at home. I live around the corner from the hospital. Like, this is too hard. And I remember calling my midwife and being like, am I being dumb? She's like, no. She said, just don't go anywhere you are not willing to go into labour. And if you do go into labour, you get down on the floor, you lie on your side, you do not change your underwear or clean up or anything. You lie on your side, you call an ambulance, they transport you on your side. That's the rules. I was like, cool. So I was off at like the mall because they had like a drop-in daycare centre that I could take Regan for 2 hours, and then bed rest was me sitting at the cafe for 2 hours not moving. And I'm like, oh well, if I go into labour, I guess the ambulance is coming to the mall, aren't they? Because like,
it's here.
What else am I going to do? But like, it was like there was just lots of little moments like that where I'm like, the fuck, like.
It is so bizarre, eh? The whole like it's happening in your body. And you have no control over it. And you're just like at the whim and the advice of all these people who you don't really know. And you just have to like trust that they've got your intentions. And like, I wholeheartedly believe in the medical system. It's a broken system, but I believe the people are good. So like, I always am like, they're not lying to me. But sometimes the things they say, you're like, what? What? How is this the advice? Like, what?
I mean, like, I got incredibly lucky that I had an amazing midwife who I utterly adore and believe, like, if she told me to do something, I believed it. Like, I remember when my waters broke at NICU in Auckland and one of the doctors or nurses said that, like, just because your waters break, it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to have the baby. And so they were like, well, there's a chance you might still go back to work. And I remember being like, really? Okay. And so my midwife rang me to check in to see how I was doing. I was like, they're telling me I might go back to work. And she's like, yeah, no. She's like, there's a whatever percentage chance that this baby's coming in the next 12 hours. I was like, thank you. That's the fucking logic I needed right now.
That feels correct.
That feels like it might actually happen. And I'm sure for some people, they then just sit there for bloody weeks. But I'm like, even if I do sit there for weeks, I don't know that I'm going to go back to my office job somehow.
Yeah, I just can't imagine anyone saying, okay, go back to work now, your waters are broken, it's fine.
Yeah, just chill out for the next few weeks until you start having contractions. And then I remember being in hospital waiting, because I went in for a checkup because I hadn't felt Hadley, my second, move much. And I was like, oh, movement seems a bit off. I feel like I've had extra discharge because they talk about that being like a sign that labour might happen. I'll message my midwife and she said, I'll meet you up at the hospital. And I said to Richard and Regan, like, I'll be back soon. Went up to the hospital and they did a test and it turns out that the discharge was my waters leaking. So they were like, no, you're staying in, you're having a Caesar. So I was like 37.6 at this point or something. They're like, you're not going home. Cool, fine. Richard came up to the hospital. My mum went and looked after Regan. And I was waiting for surgery to become available to go down, and my midwife had said, I'm going to go down and help out, like, deliver these other babies so that we can get you down there, because
bless her.
That's what she, like, I've had my obstetrician say, we do whatever your midwife, like, they love her so much and she's so well known that they're like, oh, we just do whatever she tells us to do. I'm like, great, cool, I've got the right one then.
That's who you want on your side. Yeah.
And she said to me, so if your waters break, you push the emergency button. Because he was footling breech, she's like, you push that emergency button. I was like, okay, cool. And my waters broke all over the bed, which was great because I really, really wanted my waters to break before surgery, because to me that was kind of a sign that he was ready to come.
Yeah.
My waters broke and I pushed the emergency button and a nurse and a midwife came running in and they're like, what's wrong? And I was like, my waters just broke. And one of them looked at me and was like, that's not an emergency. And I was like, he's footling breech and we're waiting for a C-section. The other lady looked at me and said, we'll get you down there right now. And I was like, thank you.
And you were like, so it is an emergency.
Kind of is an emergency, because if somebody's going to put their hand up inside me to keep that cord inside, I feel like...
Which I have seen that they do. I've seen that on, like, ED shows and stuff
Yeah.
that they will quite literally put a hand up there to
Yep.
keep everything up there.
Exactly. And so I was just like, but yeah, everything was just always manic. But
It is
that
crazy.
just sums up parenthood, really, though. Like, if it's not one thing, it's another. Forever. For the rest
Truly, and it's so bizarre that it's like you go through that whole experience and then it's just like, okay, now you've got a newborn to look after, and you're like, okay, I guess I've got no time to process that. I'll leap right into newborn life, and I guess I'll just be a parent and we'll forget about all of
It'll
it.
be totally fine. Yeah, cool. Great.
Terrifying.
Yeah, the things we do.
The things we do. All right, we'll move on to the final question. We have made it to the end, which is, if you were listening to this podcast on the day you became a parent, what would you want yourself to hear?
You know more than you think you do. Trust your gut, and rest. Just rest. Like, that is, again, I remember my midwife saying to me after a C-section, she said, what you do in the next 2 weeks is going to really impact your healing process. She's like, so your goal is to do as little as possible for the first 2 weeks. And I know that it's really hard to rest, especially when you've got other kids and you know, there's washings piling up and you need to eat. Live on takeaways for 2 to 3 weeks if you need to, if you don't have people bringing you meals. You know, I meal prepped a lot because that's what I do. But like, if you need to eat fish and chips for the first 2 weeks so that you don't have to cook, so that you can rest, do it. Because I just think rest and connection with your babe and just doing as little as possible is so important. Don't feel like you have to catch up with everybody or invite people over, or like, if you want to, go for it, because sometimes that company is really, really nice. But just do what you need to protect your mental health and your space and your babe and your own little world, because it is so brand new. But you know more than you think you do. Trust your gut, because if your gut says something, it's probably right. Women have a great sixth sense and we need to trust it more.
Yeah, totally. And then, just for a little cheeky Bear and Moo plug, what is your favourite product in the store right now?
God, all of them? No, not all of them. I think as for a mum, I will always go back to reusable nappies. And it's easy to say because that's how the business started. But to me, it is the easiest way to save money when everything is so expensive these days. You know, you're going to spend $500 or whatever getting yourself set up with cloth nappies. Disposables are just thousands and thousands of dollars going straight into landfill. So, I mean, not even from an environmental perspective, purely from a cost-saving measure, I would always say cloth nappies, because even if you've only got a handful, it will save you money. But otherwise, I also think it's really important to spoil yourself a little bit. So, you know, some of the new Betty Basics clothing that we've got, there's the South Suite
Really
that I just
cute.
living in. Yeah, and there's just comfy, like, that make you feel a little bit human again. So I think that's really important as well. But the whole dab
I was a
store-
big fan of the TikTok of Richard wearing the same shirt as everyone else. That really cracked
And
me
it's
up.
hilarious.
For those who
I don't even
haven't
know half of
seen,
these going live until they happen, because
it's
Charlie does all
so
of our
good.
filming. So good.
For those who haven't seen the Bear and Moo social media, it's fantastic in general, but Richard is heavily featured and he is hilarious every time. He just seems like the most like easygoing, go with the flow kind
It's
of.
just so not his jam. Like, this is not his sweet spot at all. But Charlie comes in, she's like, right, I need you to do this. And he's like, okay, like, sure, I'll do what you're going to tell me to do. And then she just turns it into magic. Like, we're very, very lucky to have a great little team. But
Yeah.
he does things because he knows that it's for the greater good of the business, even though I'm
Bless
pretty
him.
sure I could name 5,000 things he would rather be doing. But he just does it. He's great and we love him.
I love that. Amazing, Hannah. Thank you so much for joining us today. Do you want to give a little plug to the store, the website, tell the people where to find you and your
Absolutely.
things?
So if you're online, head to bearandmoo.co.nz. We like to say everything for your parenting journey. So whether that's pregnancy through to postpartum, through to lunch boxes and toys and all your Christmas gifting and things like that. If you are in Hamilton, our new retail store is at 1 Glennis Place in Frankton, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. But keep an eye out online because we've got a whole bunch of new products coming very soon as well.
Yay, so good. And if you need any recommendations of things to buy, come my way, because I think I bought everything online there is to buy at Bear and Moo, so come and talk to me. Hannah, thank you so much.
You are so welcome.
For our normal subscribers, this is where our podcast ends, so thank you for joining us today. And we're going to head over to the Substack where I ask Hannah a secret sixth question, so if you're interested in that, that is in the show notes. And we'll see you next week.
Why do you parent like
Thank you for listening to this episode of Why Do You Parent Like That? Why Do You Parent Like That is created by me, your gal, Abby Harrison. Huge love and snuggles to my gorgy nephew and niece, Thomas and Francis, for lending their voices to my jingle, as well as a massive thank you to the iHeartRadio Podcast Network team for giving this little pod a place to call home. Be sure to follow our socials to stay up to date with podcast happenings, as well as chaotic insights to my life. If you have a story that you reckon would be neat to share on the pod, flick me an email at whydoyouparentlikeThatpodcast@gmail.com. Love you. Say it back.
Why do you parent